Hello and welcome to day 3 of the iMac modelling series. Today we're going to be focusing on texturing and creating all the textures and materials. So let's go ahead and get started from where we left off yesterday. So what I'm going to need to do before we actually start creating the materials is we need to make some selections so that the materials will be going in the right place. So to start with, I'm going to come into we're going to go into the front perspective for now, and I'm going to come up to options or display, filter, and I'm going to turn off the grid, and I'm also just going to hide the iMac base just for now. And now we have the iMac body, and I'm just going to rename that to iMac body. And now what we need to do is, if we come into our 3D perspective, you want to make sure that everything on your model is all finished, because we're going to make it editable now, and that means that we won't be able to change anything that we've done so far. So you want to double check that your iMac body is all finished, and once you've done that, we want to open up the iMac body and we want to select all of these, or you could simply right click and go on to select children, and that will select all of them. And then we're going to hit C on the keyboard, and that's going to make them all editable. And we're going to select them all again, right click, select children, we're going to hit C again, and then right click, connect objects and delete. And then what that's going to give us, that's just going to give us one object, one editable object that now we can start making selections. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to rotate the iMac screen just so it's at 90 degrees. So you're going to see that when we rotate the iMac body, you can see that we still have the pins, the USB pins in there. So what we need to do is hold down Command or Control if you're on a Windows computer, and we're going to select the ports and the plug pins while we're rotating as well. And then while we rotate, everything will rotate at the same time. So we just want to try and get this at a 90-degree angle. Around there looks good. And now we're ready to come back into our front perspective and select the iMac body. And then if we hit K on the keyboard, that's going to bring up the knife tool. And then we come into polygon mode by selecting this button here. What we're going to do is we're going to draw a line around the screen. So what we're going to do, there's a line around here, and we're just going to, while holding down shift, that's going to give us a nice straight line. We're going to make a cut there, and then if we come back into our .3D perspective and come back into our model mode, you can see that we have a nice cut there. And when we go back into edge mode or polygon mode, you can see that there's loads of green lines, but we don't have to worry about those just yet because we won't be seeing those. Next, we're going to draw a line on the other side of the screen. Just like this. And once again, we're going to do it on the top. And we're going to do it on the bottom as well. And that one's a little bit off. and about there. And then what we're going to do, we're going to make another one where the silver meets the black at the bottom here, just like that. And then if we come back into our 3D perspective and come back onto our move tool, you can see now that we have made our selection. So we've got the screen in the middle and we have the black bevel on the outside. So now we need to actually make some selections. So we're going to come into polygon mode again by pressing this button here. We're going to select the iMac body, and then we're going to select this polygon right here in the center, which represents the screen. And then we're going to come up to select and set selection, and then we're going to name this iMac screen, and you can see that gives us a nice selection tag on our iMac body. And we also have two more, C1 and C2, but we can delete these for now. Then what we're going to do is select the outer polygons, which would be the black bevel around the screen. So we're going to select all of those, and once again we're going to come up to select, set selection, and we're going to rename this to black bev, which is short for black bevel. And we don't have to make any selections here because at the bottom here is going to be the same material as the rest of the iMac. And now we can come out of polygon mode and we can actually start to texture this now. So we're going to create the screen first. So you want to come up to create new material, and then we're going to double click to open this. Come on to the color tab and select texture, load image, and you want to navigate to the iMac resource pack, which was available to download in the first section. And then what we want to select is the iMac screen, which is a screenshot. And then you're just going to click open and then say yes. And if we close that down now and we drag and drop that material onto the iMac body, you can see we have some weirdness going on, so we're going to need to sort that out. And under the selection, so if you select the material and then come into the tag properties, and under selection we're going to write iMac screen. So if you remember, that was the set selection that we made, and it's important that it's exactly the same as the tag that we made. So you can see that even I've just put a space at the end and it hasn't recognized it. So if I just delete that space and then hit enter, you can see that it's now recognized it, and we can change the projection to frontal. Instead of frontal, we're just going to go to flat. And then what we can do is start to play around with the length U and length V. And we just want to try and match this iMac screen up as best as possible using the length U and length V. And also changing the offset U and offset V. So it's just a case of playing around with this. I'm not going to give you the exact values because everyone's project might be a little bit different. So there we go, that's looking pretty good. And with that done, you just want to come up to File and Save Incremental. So now onto the shiny black material for the bevel around the screen. So we're going to come up to Create New Material. We're going to double click to open this up. We're going to come up to Color, and we're going to change the color to black, almost black. We're going to come up to Specular, make sure Specular is checked, and we're going to come up to Reflection, check Reflection, and then select Texture, and for now, and then we're going to decrease the brightness to 1%, and then we're going to decrease the mix strength to 1% also. And then we're going to drag that material onto the iMac body, and if we look at our selection tag, what we can do, we can just Command C, we can just copy the name of that selection tag, come over to our black bevel, come onto the selection, and then just hit Command V to paste that in, and then hit enter, and then you can see we get a nice shiny black bevel around the edge of the screen. Now we're going to create the actual main material of the iMac. So we're going to come up to Create New Material, and if we double click to open this, we're going to change the colour to a nice dark grey, but a lighter grey, closer to white than black. And then we're going to come into Bump, and we're going to check Bump, and we want Noise. We're going to come up to Texture and Noise, and then we're going to change the strength to 5%, and then if we click on the noise texture, that's going to bring us in, and we can start to play around with some of the noise values. We're going to change the global scale from 100% to 1%, and then what that's going to give us is a really small bump. And then we're going to come down and make sure that the low clip is on 0%, the high clip is on 100%, and we're going to change the brightness to around 20, we'll say 21, 22, and we're also going to change the contrast to something around 30. If I just open this up, you can see the change that it makes. So we're going to change this to around 30. And I'm just going to make the grey just a touch lighter. And then what we can do is drag and drop this onto the iMac body. But what we're going to need to do is actually drag the material below the last two materials that we made. So you want to make sure it's behind the iMac screen and the black bevel. And then what that will do, that will texture the entire iMac. And you can see that we're going to need to add this material to the plug sockets. So we've added it to the plug pins, and we're also going to need to add it to the ports. Now I think we may go back and change these to a darker colour just to make it a little bit more realistic, but we may do that at a later stage. And also, if I unhide the iMac base, what I'm going to do is drag and drop that material onto the iMac base as well. And with that done, you want to come up to File and Save Incremental. Now what we're going to do is create the Apple logos for the front and back. So come over to create new material and double click to open that, and on the, if we come over to alpha and check alpha and select texture, load image, and you navigate to your iMac resource pack and upload the apple.photoshop document. So if we open that and hit yes, and then we come over to color, and we're going to change this color to black. And if we right click on the picture here, you can actually change it, so you can change it to a knot, and you can change it to loads of things, but I'm just going to change it to a plane just so we can see what we're working with a little bit better. And next we want to add reflection, so if we check reflection and we come on to texture, for now we're going to change the brightness to around 30, 20, we'll say 25, and we're going to change the mix strength to something quite low, maybe 15, and we're going to change the blurriness to 5%, and we just want to uncheck specular, and then we can close out of that. And then what we can do is if we drag and drop this Apple logo onto the iMac, if we select this button and come into polygon mode again, and we select this polygon right here, and then we come up to select and set selection, and we're going to name this Apple logo front, and then what we can do is drag and drop our Apple logo material onto the iMac body, come back to our move tool, and you can see that we need to select our Apple logo material, and then we come into our set selection and copy and paste this Apple logo front text that we just wrote, come back over to our material and paste that into the selection. And then what we can do is, if we select this material and then come over to this button here, which is the texture axis, and that allows us to actually move the texture around. And we change the projection from UV mapping to flat. You can see that we now get a better understanding of where our logo is, and we can start to uncheck tile, so we don't want it tiled, and we can decrease the length U and also decrease the length V. We can start to reposition this. So I'm going to change length U to something around 15, and same again for length V, around 15. And then we just start to position this, and you can see that we're going to need to scale it down more, so maybe 10% with 10%. And we'll try 8%. So that's looking pretty good at the moment, and we just want to try and center this up. And that one's looking pretty good for the moment. And now we can come out of the texture axis and we spin round. And then what we're going to do is come into polygon edge mode again. And what we're going to do, we're going to select these polygons here. And this is where, roughly where the back logo is. And then if we come up to select, set selection, and we name this to Apple logo back. And then what I'm going to do is copy and paste that Apple material. And if I open up that, and I'm going to rename this to Apple logo back. And then we drag and drop that onto our iMac body. And then come over to the selection that we just made. Copy the text. Come back onto our material and paste it into the selection. And then come back onto our material and change the projection from UV mapping to flat. Uncheck tile. And then if we come over to our texture axis button, what we can do is start to reposition this now. And we're going to need to scale it down again. And you're going to see that the Apple logo is actually mirrored the wrong way around, but that can be easily solved by coming on over to the length U or length V, and we're just going to change from, instead of plus 25, we're going to change it to minus 25, and that's going to mirror the texture. And then if we just reposition it here and just start to play around with the length U and length V values, just to try and get it looking nice, and then try and position this in the center. Could do with scaling it down just a touch. About there, looks good. And now we can come back out of our texture axis tag, and we have a spin round and try and double check that everything is textured. So we've got all the pins and the plugs done. That's all looking good. We've got the two Apple logos, and we have the screen, and we also have the main texture for the iMac. So with that done, you just want to come up to File and hit Save Incremental, just so we don't lose any of the hard work that we've just done. So that pretty much wraps it up for today's video. I hope you had fun learning it. So if you tune in tomorrow, and we're going to be doing the lighting and texturing. So thanks for watching everyone, and I'll see you later.